In the early days of the Israelite civilization, polytheism was the norm. The Israelites, like their Canaanite neighbors, worshipped a pantheon of gods, each with their unique domains and responsibilities. Yahweh, in this context, was one among many, albeit a significant one. However, as the Israelite society evolved, so did their religious beliefs. The shift from polytheism to henotheism marked a significant turning point in the Israelites' spiritual journey. Henotheism, a term coined by the renowned scholar Max Muller, refers to the worship of a single god while not denying the existence or possible worship of other deities. In the context of ancient Israel, this meant that while the Israelites acknowledged the existence of other gods, they chose to worship Yahweh exclusively. This shift was not abrupt, but rather a gradual process influenced by various socio-political factors. The Israelites' transition to henotheism can be traced back to their interactions with neighboring civilizations. As they came into contact with different cultures and religious practices, the Israelites began to question their polytheistic beliefs. The worship of multiple gods, each with their distinct domains, seemed increasingly chaotic and disorganized. In contrast, the concept of a single supreme deity offered a sense of order and unity. Yahweh, with his strong association with the Israelites and his growing prominence in their religious practices, naturally emerged as the chosen deity. The Israelites began to view Yahweh not just as their God, but as the supreme God, superior to all others. This marked the beginning of their transition to henotheism. However, this shift was not without its challenges. The Israelites had to reconcile their new belief in Yahweh's supremacy with their traditional polytheistic practices. This led to a unique blend of beliefs and practices. While Yahweh was revered as the supreme God, elements of polytheism persisted. For instance, the Israelites continued to acknowledge the existence of other gods, albeit in a diminished capacity. And that leads us to an important question. How does a god like Yahweh, a warrior god, just one among many others worshipped in those regions, become the only one and true God? In the ancient texts and inscriptions, we find intriguing clues that hint at this transformation. The ancient Israelites, who once revered a pantheon of deities, gradually began to focus their worship on Yahweh. This shift was not abrupt, but a gradual process that unfolded over centuries. When we delve deeper into the gradual process and transformation, we find evidence of alterations in the sacred texts. There were attempts to suppress the earlier beliefs to erase the traces of the past. One such instance is found in the ancient texts where Asherah, a goddess who was once revered alongside Yahweh, was systematically removed from the religious narrative. The texts that once referred to Asherah as the consort of Yahweh were altered, reducing her to a mere sacred pillar or a wooden image. Yet the original texts tell a different story. In Deuteronomy 33, we find a passage that speaks of Yahweh coming from Sinai, accompanied by a divine presence. The original Hebrew text suggests that this divine presence was none other than Asherah. This revelation, though suppressed in later texts, provides a glimpse into the henotheistic beliefs of the ancient Israelites, and more than that, give us an attestation of the polytheistic structure of the biblical records and scriptures. Later in history, the monotheism of the Hebrew scriptures would be appropriated by the adherents of Christianity, who would continue veneration of Yahweh, eventually known as Jehovah, by Christian monks and is commonly used today. The character and power of Yahweh were codified following the Babylonian captivity of the 6th century BCE, and the Hebrew scriptures were canonized during the Second Temple period, approximately 515 BCE to 70 CE, to include the concept of a Messiah whom Yahweh would send to the Jewish people to lead and redeem them. Yahweh as the all-powerful creator, preserver, and redeemer of the universe was then later developed by the early Christians as their God, who had sent his son Jesus as the promised Messiah, and Islam interpreted this same deity as Allah in their belief system. And finally, after the entire historical and theological journey we have undertaken, an important question concludes: why do we venerate this biblical entity, forged in the depths of history, as a singular God? Why do we, as a society, continue to offer thanks, seek favors, and sing praises to this God? Perhaps we need courage to dive deeper within ourselves and understand who or what the gods are that hide behind the so-called sacred scriptures. This topic is essential for those who want to study in depth, and not superficially, the subject of the Anunnaki and the theory of ancient aliens. Understanding that Yahweh was never a single God, but was transformed into a single God throughout history, is fundamental for observing the extraterrestrial influence on the development of our civilization. I want to invite you to realize that the evolution of Yahweh, from a God among others, to become the sole God revered worldwide, happened through two paths. The first one, from a human perspective. As we have been studying, the shift from polytheism to monotheism in ancient Israel is a complex and gradual process that likely spanned several centuries. In the late Bronze Age, polytheism was the norm, and various deities were associated with powerful cities. Israel, for example, had its national god, Yahweh, but acknowledged a pantheon of deities, much like the other ancient Near Eastern states. There are numerous references to an assembly of deities consisting of both gods and goddesses, presided over by one deity who was the head of the pantheon. As time passed, the perception of Yahweh began to change, transitioning from one of the gods to the head of the pantheon. In this phase, there was still no denial of the existence of other deities, but Yahweh assumed a more dominant role. This marks the beginning of a slow transition towards monotheism, where Yahweh was recognized as the national God of Israel, but other deities were increasingly considered non-entities, mere shams made of wood or stone. Eventually, the concept of monotheism was affirmed, and Yahweh alone was recognized as God. It's critical to remember that this transition was not a straightforward or sudden event. It involved a slow and complex process of reinterpretation and recontextualization of religious beliefs and practices over time. This gradual shift can be seen as a human-driven process, with changes in social, political, and cultural contexts playing a significant role. The second path, or the second perspective that I would like to present to you, and perhaps it is the fundamental one regarding the studies proposed, is the theological transition of Yahweh to become the sole God. In reality, it is not the transition from a human perspective, but from the perspective of the gods themselves. If in the ancient aliens theory we understand aliens as real physical entities that visited our ancient past, we need to observe how one of them became the only and powerful God. We even need to question whether Yahweh was the name of a specific entity or perhaps a denomination for a specific group of individuals. Therefore, we need to draw a connection between Yahweh, his name and representation, and our main subject of study, the Anunnaki. This is because in all the regions where the name of Yahweh, El, Asherah, and other gods appeared, it is exactly the same regions where the Anunnaki appeared and were revered as gods. And in this case, we are not discussing anything related to the ancient aliens theory, but rather the historical and social perspective of those ancient civilizations. But now, evolving in this analysis based on the accounts from the gods themselves, we need to quickly explore the similarities between some of the most well-known Anunnaki entities, Enki, Enlil, and Ninurta, and their similarities with Yahweh. Enlil, known as the god of weather and war, was considered the king of lands and the father of the gods. His actions in Sumerian mythology mirror some aspects of Yahweh. For example, Enlil tried to exterminate humans by sending a flood, a narrative that parallels the biblical story of Noah's Ark. Although many people associate Yahweh to Enlil, when we go deeper, we understand that this assumption may not be possible. The contrast between Yahweh and Enlil becomes even more pronounced when considering Yahweh's distinct attribute as a warrior. In the scriptures, Yahweh is depicted as a fierce warrior, akin to a hero marching into battle. Isaiah 42:13 echoes this sentiment by stating, "Yahweh goes forth like a warrior, like a hero. He whips up his rage. He shall roar and cry out, and over his enemies he shall prevail." Furthermore, the Song of Miriam in Numbers chapter 15 proclaims, "A warrior is Yahweh." The Bible consistently portrays Yahweh as the Lord of hosts, emphasizing his role as a commanding leader of a formidable army. Isaiah 13:4 boldly declares, "Yahweh, the Lord of hosts, a warring army commands." In stark contrast, the Mesopotamian records lack any indications or suggestions of Enlil possessing such a warrior-like image. But what about Enki? Enki, the god of knowledge, sciences, and hidden metals, possessed a unique combination of biological and mineralogical expertise. His mastery extended to the establishment of mining operations in southeastern Africa, making him the ultimate authority in that realm. These attributes closely aligned with those ascribed to Yahweh, the biblical deity. Proverbs affirmed that wisdom and understanding emanated from Yahweh's mouth, drawing a parallel to Enki's bestowal of unparalleled wisdom upon the wise Adapa. Yahweh himself declared ownership over gold and silver, while promising to grant treasures from dark and secret places. This intriguing passage can be read on Haggai 2:8. The story of the deluge serves as a prime example of the convergence between Mesopotamian and biblical narratives. In the Mesopotamian accounts, Enki takes extraordinary measures to warn Zusudra, his loyal follower, about the impending catastrophe. He provides precise instructions for building an ark, saving animal life, and ensuring the survival of humanity. In the Bible, it is Yahweh who fulfills these roles. Further evidence supporting the identification of Yahweh with Enki emerges when examining Enki's domains. According to Mesopotamian texts, Enki received dominion over Africa after the division of earth between the Enlilites and the Enkyites. The Apsu, the region renowned for its gold mines, became Enki's primary abode, alongside the city of Eridu in Sumer. We propose that the biblical term Apse Eretz, often translated as the ends of the earth, refers to this distant land, southern Africa to be precise. It is in this place, Apse Eretz, that Yahweh is said to exercise judgment and will rule upon Israel's restoration. Consequently, Yahweh can be equated with Enki in his role as the ruler of the Apsu. The similarities between Enki and Yahweh become more pronounced, perhaps even uncomfortable for the monotheistic Bible, when we encounter a passage in the book of Proverbs that exalts Yahweh's unsurpassed greatness through rhetorical questions. These questions touch upon divine acts such as ascending and descending from heaven, capturing the wind in one's hands, and binding waters as if with a cloak. Most crucially, the passage inquires about the one who established the Apse Eretz and asks for the name of this entity and that of their son, if such knowledge can be obtained. In Mesopotamian sources, Enki allocated the Apsu to his son Nergal. The polytheistic flavor of asking about the ruler's name and that of their offspring can only be explained by inadvertently retaining a passage from the Sumerian original texts. This is akin to the earlier occurrence of us in phrases like, "Let us make the atom," and "Let us come down" in the Tower of Babel story. In Proverbs 34, the gloss substitutes Yahweh for Enki. So, was Yahweh essentially Enki garbed in biblical Hebrew attire? It would be overly simplistic to assert so. Examining the tale of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden reveals that while it is the Nahash, the serpent manifestation of Enki as the knower of biological secrets, who initiates Adam and Eve's acquisition of sexual knowledge necessary for procreation, he does not represent Yahweh. Instead, he serves as an antagonist to Yahweh, paralleling Enki's relationship with Enlil. In the Sumerian texts, Enlil coerces Enki into transferring some of the newly created primitive workers intended for gold mining in the Apsu to Eden in Mesopotamia, where they engage in farming and shepherding. In the Bible, it is Yahweh who places Adam in the Garden of Eden to tend and maintain it. Yahweh, not the serpent, assumes the role of the master of Eden, conversing with Adam and Eve, discovering their transgressions and expelling them. In all these aspects, the Bible equates Yahweh not with Enki, but with Enlil. Ninurta, son of Enlil, was revered as the god of agriculture, hunting, and war. His role in the epic poem Lugale shows him slaying a demon and using stones to build the Tigris and Euphrates rivers for irrigation. He is seen as a protector, much like Yahweh is in the Bible. Moreover, Ninurta's depiction as a formidable warrior deity, particularly beloved by the Assyrians, aligns with the representation of Yahweh as a divine warrior leading the heavenly army. Another intriguing parallel between Ninurta and the biblical Lord emerges from an inscription discovered during the reign of Ashurbanipal, the Assyrian king who once invaded Elam. In this inscription, Ninurta is referred to as the mysterious god who lingers in a secret place where no one can see what his divine being is about. The notion of an unseen god brings to mind the enigmatic nature often associated with the biblical Lord. However, it is important to note that Ninurta was not regarded as a deity in hiding by the earlier Sumerians, and depictions of him were not uncommon. Yet, as we explore the Yahweh-Ninurta connection further, we encounter a significant ancient text that sheds light on a momentous event, challenging the notion that Ninurta and Yahweh are one and the same. This particular text deals with a striking and unforgettable occurrence, whose specific details seem to indicate that Ninurta could not have been Yahweh. One of the most pivotal actions attributed to Yahweh in the Bible, with far-reaching consequences and enduring memories, is the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. The event is recounted in Mesopotamian texts as well, allowing for a comparison of the deities involved. In the book of Genesis, chapter 19, Sodom and Gomorrah, cities situated in the lush plain south of the Sea of Salt, are depicted as wicked. Yahweh descends from his abode and, accompanied by two angels, visits Abram and his wife Sarai in their encampment near Hebron. After predicting that the elderly couple will have a son, Yahweh dispatches the two angels to Sodom to assess the extent of the city's sinfulness. Yahweh then informs Abram that if their sins are confirmed, the cities and their inhabitants will be destroyed. Abram pleads with Yahweh to spare Sodom if at least 50 righteous individuals are found within its walls. Yahweh agrees to the plea, after Abram successfully bargains the number down to 10 and departs. The angels, having witnessed the city's wickedness, warn Lot to take his family and flee. Lot requests permission to seek refuge in the mountains, and the angels consent, delaying the imminent destruction. Ultimately, the fateful doom of the cities is set in motion, as Yahweh rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah sulfurous fire, coming from Yahweh from the skies, and he upheavaled those cities and the whole plain and all the inhabitants thereof, and all that which grew upon the ground. And Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before Yahweh, and gazed in the direction of Sodom and Gomorrah, toward the land of the plain, and he beheld vapor arising from the earth as the smoke of a furnace. In Mesopotamian annals, this very event is extensively documented as the climax of Marduk's struggle to establish supremacy on earth. The Mesopotamian text explicitly attributes the upheaval of the sinful cities to Nergal, not Ninurta. Considering that the Bible asserts that it was Yahweh himself who unleashed the destruction upon the cities, rather than the two angels sent to investigate, it becomes clear that Yahweh cannot be equated with Ninurta. In his book, Divine Encounters, Zecharia Sitchin grapples with the enigma of Yahweh's identity. In the end of the book, he wrote, "The biblical suggestion that the Elohim, the gods, or the Anunnaki, had a god seems totally incredible at first, but quite logical on reflection. At the very conclusion of our first book in the Earth Chronicles series, The 12th Planet, having told the story of the planet Nibiru and how the Anunnaki, the biblical Nephilim, who had come to Earth from it, created mankind, we posed the following question. And if the Nephilim were the gods who created man on Earth, did evolution alone on the 12th planet create the Nephilim? Technologically advanced, capable hundreds of thousands of years before us to travel in space, arriving at a cosmological explanation for the creation of the solar system and, as we begin to do, to contemplate and understand the universe, the Anunnaki must have pondered their origins and arrived at what we call religion, their concept of God. Who created the Nephilim, the Anunnaki, on their planet? The Bible itself provides the answer. Yahweh, it states, was not just a great God, a great king over all of the Elohim, Psalms 95:3. He was there on Nibiru before they had come to be on it. Just as the Anunnaki had been on Earth before the Atom, so was Yahweh on Nibiru, Olam before the Anunnaki. The Creator preceded the created. In other words, Sitchin suggests that Yahweh is not an Anunnaki, but the divine entity worshipped by them.